Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some drinking games that honestly may or may not keep those hot chicks that you ordered off a random website at your party. But in reality, that's up to whether or not you reveal that you have chlamydia. To begin, let's start off with a little bit of history. Katabas is one of the oldest recorded drinking games, which involved flinging the leftover sediment from unfiltered wine across a room at a target in an all-male chamber, also known as a sausage fest. Players would lounge on pillowed couches and drink from massive bowls that looked like upside-down frisbees. The throwing technique was similar to the throwing motion of a frisbee, and honestly, that's pretty much it. If you hit the target, it made a sound. If you missed the target, you were laughed at. That's all it was, just good old guy fun. Katabas seemed like a really lighthearted game compared to some of the other ones that came a little later. The ales rules, for example, originated from the Tang Dynasty of ancient China. This was kind of a really simple game, and it just involved taking sticks out of a jar, and the sticks would just tell you who drank and how much they drank. Kind of like a really crude version of King's Cup, which is something we'll get into a little bit later. The only difference between this game and how modern day games are played is the fact that in this game you could be forced to take 40 drinks at once, and if you decided to leave the group and be out, you became a social outcast and no one liked you, not even your own parents. So tolerance and just being good at drinking was a huge thing. And if you sucked, well then you shouldn't have sat down in the first place. One of the games I discovered in my research that was literally labeled as a lethal drinking game is Passatella, which was invented in Roman times. Of course, leave it to the Romans to come up with a game to kill each other without needing to get blood everywhere. But really, this game doesn't seem to be lethal unless you make it lethal. And in reality, you just have to not be an absolute moron in order to do that. Whoever made this game had a massive power trip at one point because the entire purpose of this game is everyone buys a drink, but only two people in the entire place can decide who drinks them. And while that seems like kind of simple and harmless, if only one of the two people decided that you couldn't drink, then they would have to consume your drink for you. So, in the event that you were playing with 40 people, you would probably end up drinking 10 or so drinks every round. While this doesn't necessarily seem lethal, what would become lethal is the fact that people who weren't allowed to drink continuously would get pissed off and start fights, riots, stabbings, and shootings. So if you happened to be one of the two people making the decisions, you were probably going to get shot by the end of the night. And honestly, who really wants to be in charge of a bunch of drunk people when you can just sit at home and drink peacefully? One of the dumber games prior to the 20th century was something known as the puzzle jug. I'm not entirely sure if this is still around in modern day France, but basically it was just a cup with a bunch of random holes in it. The whole point was you had to try to chug the cup without spilling it, and people just got to laugh at you while it spilled out of the many holes in the cup. And it was really just kind of a dumb waste of time, alcohol, and pretty much everything. This is one of those things that I feel like the French should have just forgotten and let disappear in history. So now that we've covered the duller side of drinking games, let's look at what they've evolved into. What better thing to start off at than the classic beer pong? Many of you are probably going, beer pong is really simple. We all know what this is. Why are you telling us about this? Well, yes, you probably know what beer pong is, but did you know you could take it to an entirely different level? That's right, you can take it to the level known as 78. This involves 78 cups on either side of the table and 2 full racks of beer. A total of 60 beer cans for a total of about 10 people, if you decide to play somewhat safe. Each person receives a partner, and depending on whether or not your partner is good, you can either fall down at the end of the night, or you can somehow make it home. You might be looking at this picture of 78 cups and going, wow, it's impossible to miss. But let me tell you something, when you hit the second game, that's right, when you hit the second game, because the first one is just a warm-up. It's a miracle if you can actually keep it on the table, because at certain points in the game, you may not even see the table. Honestly, this is probably one of my personal favorites in terms of drinking games, but I don't encourage alcoholism for other people, just for myself. Another drinking game great for ice-breaking and just overall meeting people is King's Cup, or as I call it, Kings. This is kind of similar to the Tang Dynasty Ales rules game, except instead of a jar of random sticks, it's a deck of cards, and each card happens to delineate one particular action. If you've never played King's Cup before, I'll go through them really quick, and if you get confused, Google it. The cards go as follows. Ace is waterfall, 2 is you, 3 is me, 4 is floor, 5 is guys, 6 is chicks, 7 is heaven, 8 is mate, 9 is rhyme, 10 is categories, Jack is never have I ever, Queen is questions, and King is you. Make your own fucking rule. In reality, it's that simple. And it's actually a pretty fun game. Another great drinking game is one of my personal favorites known as Beer Ball. In this game, you can play with 2 to 4 players, and there's a lot of different variations to this one. If you have friends, which seems unlikely, but just imagine for our example's sake, there are 4 of you, and there are 4 beers, 1 on each corner of the table. You take a ping pong ball and you try to hit someone else's beer on the other side of the table. If you hit someone else's beer, that person then has to find the ping pong ball and slam it on the table. In between the ball hitting the beer and being put back on the table, you have to chug your beer as fast as you possibly can. If your beer is knocked over, you have to grab a new one. It's honestly a very decent game to get drunk relatively quick and also really cheap. If all of these seem too complicated for you, here's a good recommendation. You can turn on Cake Boss, and every time Buddy happens to say the word fondant, take a shot. And if you do that correctly, you'll probably need an ambulance within the first 10 minutes of every episode. That's all I have time for today because I need to go to sleep. But if you enjoyed today's video and you maybe tried any of these games, leave a like. And if you have games that weren't included in today's video, comment them below. And if neither of those things apply to you, just get out of here because no one really cares who you are and what you think. Have a great day, and maybe I'll see you again.